Shashi Kumar is again somebody who doesn't need any introduction, but I do want to say, following from what Nikhil said, he with great hope started a television channel well before the kind of explosion of television channels that you see in the country today, and tried to really put that 1975 judgment of the airwaves being free. He actually tried to put it into place. So, Shashi Kumar, without too much ado.
Thank you, Chairperson Geeta, Sainath, Nikhil. Friends, I don't agree with Nikhil that we have no freedom of speech. We have freedom of speech. We don't have freedom after speech. I would love to, from the response I got for that, I'd love to claim that as my own, but it's Pali Nariman who said this, quoting a judge in Singapore. We are, I think, at a defining moment now in this country, not just in terms of our democracy, which is of course at the crossroads, but also, and that is very dangerous, very distressing for somebody who's been in the media for so many decades, we are also at a defining moment in terms of our media. There are forces acting on the media which are bad enough, and then there are the sins of commission and omission of the media, which we should be ashamed about. The media in this country are different from many other media. If you look around us, we have democracies. We have qualified democracies in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Pakistan, all over the place. But they are qualified democracies. They are democracies which are stunted in one form or the other. What has defined Indian democracy for long has been that if you can say democracy in one breath, you're able to say a free and freewheeling media in the next breath. But the recent manifestations of the media, what the media has been doing in recent times, has created a crisis of confidence in the media, is creating a disconnect between the people and the media, and a section, I would say a small section of the media, is giving this free media, which is so crucial to democracy, a bad name. Let me first get rid of all the red herrings. When somebody sits on a primetime national channel and says, tell the nation, he needs to have a sense of how much of the nation he represents. According to the TAM report of November 2015, the aggregate viewership of the English news channels is 0.36%. Aggregate viewership of the English language news channels. And this gentleman's channel must be a subsect of that. And when you sit there and have the gumption to say, tell the nation, what kind of representative media is that? You start on such a high horse. And we are caught up in this. We are caught up in sometimes in a false discourse. I think it's important, I think it's imperative now to explore many of these myths. What is happening is we are caught in a media ecology where we have become habituated to the media so much. When I say media, I'm referring to the formal media. Happily and luckily for us, there is a strong attack on this formal media from the flanks of the social media. And it is on the social media that we see the alternatives, the combativeness, the differences that make a difference to democracy. But in the formal media, we are seeing increasingly a tendency to not to describe the world. We are taught as reporters, you're supposed to report the world, you're supposed to describe the world. They are prescribing the world for us. They say, you believe this, you do this, short of saying sit straight, go to the toilet, come back, they're telling us everything. You know? And we are listening to this because we are so determined by the media. We become so habituated to the media that if it hasn't happened on television, it hasn't happened, period. There was an old Sumerian edict, 2000 BC, if I'm right, which said, that which is not recorded does not exist. This is a modern version of that. And therefore, the representative is becoming the real in our minds. If we saw something happening in front of our eyes, I doubt whether we'll believe it. Television has to tell us that, or the print newspaper has to tell us that tomorrow. There's a wonderful saying in Kalidasa's Avijnana Shakuntalam, as translated by A.K. Ramanujam. You know the story of Shakuntalam, of King Dushyanta has, he's lost his memory, he doesn't know, he had this affair with this lovely woman, and the ring is lost. But somewhere along the line he says, my mind takes strange turns. Like the elephant which passes before me, and I cannot recognize it. But after it has passed, I see the footprints of the elephant and say, these are the footprints of an elephant, and therefore that creature that passed before me must have been an elephant. If there is an elephant in this room, we will not recognize it. Somebody has to tell us, either based on the footprints or later on, that was an elephant. The media has to tell us, and then we respect that it's an elephant. So this incapacity to recognize manifest truths before us, our growing incapacity to recognize what is happening around us, and allowing the media to interpret the world for us, to contextualize the world for us, is becoming dangerous because the media is doing it with a spin, the media is doing it with intent, media is doing it with malice, aforethought and afterthought. The media is doing it with vested interests. The media is paying the cat's paw, the propaganda arm of who we know who. And therefore the media becomes unrepresentative and dangerous. Let me look at the precise issue we are battling now. Who pitted the soldier against the student? It was not the politician who did it first. It was the media on prime time news hour. And this gentleman who actually was leading that. When our soldiers are dying on the battlefields, how dare you say this in your campus? What a way to trivialize the Indian soldier. What a way to make him a cardboard cutout character. Is the Indian soldier fighting in the heights of Siachen or in Kashmir or on our borders for a parcel of land? Sometimes useless land where nothing is cultivated. It's kind of no man's land, most of these border areas. The Indian soldier is fighting for our constitutional values, for our freedoms, for the hard-fought values which our nationalist leaders have brought us. He's not fighting for some inert land there. And when those freedoms are exercised, to pit the soldier against those who exercise that freedom is doing injustice, is making a mockery of Indian soldier. And this is what our channels do. And therefore, I think some of our news anchors have a lot to answer for. You do not reduce the Indian soldier or the sacrifice of the Indian soldier to such low-grade kind of arguments. I think the basic problem is that we have been taught in journalism that fearless journalism or truthful journalism or meaningful journalism is that which talks truth to power, or that which comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. We don't have journalism of that kind, at least in the dominant section of the electronic media today. I'm not saying all journalists are bad. I think there's a good, sizable section of Indian journalism which continues to tell us what is happening, which is why we know what is happening. But this small subsection gives the whole profession a bad name. And the reason why this has happened, why this has been perpetuated and come to this snowball effect is because conventionally, journalists do not criticize journalists. They are thick as thieves. That I see is breaking now. Today we are talking about it. I don't think I would have spoken against journalism and journalistic and channels some years back in a public forum. There would have been small lapses here and there, or big lapses here and there, but you still believe that it's important to keep together in the cause of democracy, in the public interest, not in the cause of TRPs, not in the cause of laughing your way to the bank, not on the cause of making profiteering. But today, you can see the crisis in journalism comes from the self-doubt of journalists, that journalists have started talking about what the others who are giving them a bad name are doing. And this, I think, is creating a major problem in terms of the confidence of journalism. There's a crisis of credibility as far as journalism is concerned. That it is unrepresentative of the larger Indian reality, Sainath will tell you. That, there's nothing in the Indian journalism which represents ruralness of India, that in any case it is an urban preoccupation, it's a middle class kind of preoccupation, that we are not worried about what happens in the overwhelming majority of the population in India. These are all long-standing grievances of journalism. But today, the more acute problem is that you become a handmaiden, not even of a government. I'm even willing to forgive a journalist for toeing to a government's line, whichever the government. There are interesting journals in this country, newspapers and channels, which have done that and yet served some useful public purpose. But when you serve a communal agenda, knowing that it is bad, knowing that it is dangerous, knowing that it is divisive, knowing that it is bad for journalism itself, that I think is unforgivable. That is what is the new manifestation of journalism. We saw that happening, and it's not as if journalism is not part of the problem. Journalism has been part of the problem in ethnic divides and communal divides. In the Rwandan crisis, when the Tutsis were set upon, it was the Radio Rwanda, which actually was inciting them. They were telling them where to find them, where you can attack, where the Hutus can attack the Tutsis, in which churches are they hiding, under which bridges are they hiding. And between that, they were playing songs, pop songs, like our FM radio stations. We saw that happening on a different scale when Gujarat happened in 2002, where the local cable radio and cable TV network and some of the regional local language papers as well were inciting the mobs. So journalism is not a paragon of virtue, has never been that. There have been these bad elements, but today it looks like those bad elements are becoming sanctified. You're making it look like a virtue to talk about nationalism in the way that you are, and giving nationalism a bad name, the Indian soldiery a bad name, and journalism itself a bad name. So I think it's important, as Nikhil I think finally said, we need consciously to ask for a media reform movement in this country. We have the Right to Information Act in this country, which is a very historic right. It gave us a right to information, any citizen. We need similarly a right to information from our media. If we don't get such a right to information from our media, why should we give media the kind of moral and constitutional high ground we have given it? We have not given, the Indian Constitution does not give journalists any automatic right. They only have the right of every other citizen, to profess, freedom of speech, of expression, to profess any, to practice any profession. Articles 19(1)(a), G of the Constitution. It's not like the US Constitution where the First Amendment specifically says Congress shall make no laws which abridge the freedom of the press. There's nothing like that in the Indian Constitution. So journalists have the high ground that they have because civil society, the people, the publics of this country have given them that moral high ground because they believe they protect their rights. I would wager that today if you ran a referendum in this country about the trust in journalists by the people at large, I don't know where it will fare. In the United States, they actually did it. And they found that journalists were rated just slightly above second car, salesmen. When you try to say second-hand car salesman. Because they'll bluff, they'll say anything, Journalists came slightly above that. I hope we are not somewhere in that, in that league. So that, I think, is the crisis of journalism, and it's important for journalists themselves to to think about this, to interrogate themselves, to put themselves on the dock. I'll conclude by just Umberto Eco, a very important philosopher who passed away, has spoken about this so eloquently. He says, in a democracy there are, of course, we know the separation of powers, the three pillars. We have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And then there is a fourth pillar of democracy, which is the press, the fourth estate. And Eco says, while the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are accountable to the people, institutionally or constitutionally, the executive is through the legislature is, whether it's parliament or state legislature, every 4 or 5 years you have to go back to the people to come back if you can. Even the judiciary is, because notionally you can impeach a judge with 2/3 majority in both houses of parliament. We almost did that in the case of one judge, but they didn't proceed because you didn't want to drag the fair name of judiciary into the mud. So while the three pillars are accountable to the people, institutionally or constitutionally, it is the fourth pillar of democracy, the fourth estate, the free press, that is not so constitutionally or institutionally accountable. And Umberto Eco adds, almost in the same breath, indeed, that is the way it should be. Because if that fourth pillar were to be made institutionally or constitutionally accountable, one of the other three pillars has to supervise, has to implement that accountability. And in such a case, that will no longer be a free press. This is the whole argument against external regulation of the press. That is the way it should be. But then it becomes all the more necessary for that media to put itself in the dock every once in a while and ask of itself whether it is doing justly by the people who have given it that right. That, I think, has not happened, and because of that, the entire free media might be on trial today. That is the media trial of the day. Thank you very much.
Absolutely essential that we start discussing the need for a media reform movement, and as both of our speakers have talked,